gospel is the word of God, and it isn't a dead word.
How do I know the Scriptures is to be believed? Because Jesus Christ has told me so.
Before we get into this week's episode, I want to take a minute to tell you about this year's annual preaching conference at Westminster Seminary. It'll be on the 14th and 15th of October, and our theme for this year is the cross and the cost. As you may know, our mission here at Westminster is to train specialists in the Bible to proclaim the whole counsel of God for Christ and his global church. A key part of that is encouraging and developing our students as preachers and supporting those who are already in ministry, specifically in their preaching ministry. This year we'll be joined by Derek Thomas, Steve Nichols, and our very own David Garner as we explore our theme together. It should prove to be a time of great blessing and fellowship and rich teaching. You really ought to be here for it. There should be a link to register for the conference in the description, and I hope to see you there. We pray that God will bless us richly as we gather together on the 14th and 15th of October here at Westminster Seminary. Thank you.
This is the Westminster Podcast. My name is Nate Shannon, and today I'm flanked by Paul D. Wolfe. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nate. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so Paul, I'm very grateful to have you on the podcast today because I want to support you as you try to fill a huge pair of shoes. And metaphorically and physically, Jerry McFarland is a tall man. And I don't know what size shoes he wears, but I bet my shoes would fit inside of his shoes. But Jerry has been a couple times a guest on this show. Jerry is now retired in a professional sense, but he's a kingdom soldier and marches on.
That he is.
But he's the former dean of online students, and you are now the dean of online students.
That I am, as of the beginning of June.
So let me officially, publicly welcome you, Paul. We're so glad to have you at Westminster.
I'm grateful for that, and I should say I have felt warmly welcomed by this whole community. Westminster isn't new to me because I'm a double alum, so right. I feel like I'm coming back round to it. But I have come back to it finding a warm welcome waiting for me, and I've been grateful for that.
I'm glad to hear that. So let me point out that in my experience, our online program is one thing, huge. Secondly, excellent. Just speaking of the curriculum is excellent. The course design is excellent. I got firsthand experience of course development. It's cutting edge. I'm really proud of it, and the team are just stellar and very cool people. To get theological, they're cool.
Absolutely.
But in addition to that, we are very grateful to have had Jerry and to now have you, Paul, full-time dedicated to pastoral care, spiritual well-being of our students.
Right.
Which is just tremendous. What I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, Paul, tell us, we want to know what you're bringing to the table.
Sure.
Which means where you came from, what you've been up to, and what got you to this point. So a little bit of autobiography, if you indulge us, Paul.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in. So grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
The
Burgh. There's an H on the end.
That's right.
There's an E on the end of Wolfe. There's an H on the end of Pittsburgh. Let's get clear on these things. So grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, and most of my extended family is still there. My parents are there.
Okay.
Several of my siblings. So Pittsburgh still feels like home.
How about that?
And then I went down to Virginia to go to college. I went to the University of Virginia there in my beloved Charlottesville. And after graduation, moved up to the northern Virginia area, which is really the suburbs of Washington, D.C. In fact, it's interesting. The rest of Virginia looks at northern Virginia, says, you people aren't really Virginia. You belong to Washington.
Yeah,
so anyway,
like Texas and Austin.
right.
Yeah.
So moved up to the northern Virginia area right out of college, thinking naively I'd be there for a year or two. And 32 years later, I've been there the whole time. So I moved up to the Washington area, got a job in Washington and worked on Capitol Hill for a few years.
You're working for Arlen Specter?
I did, yeah. I worked in his mailroom and then did defense and foreign policy work for him. Wow. That was a very interesting experience, to be sure. But while I was there, living in the D.C. area, I found this Presbyterian church in Fairfax, Virginia. Became a member of that church. And so a few years later, when I decided I wanted to pack up and pick up and come to Westminster to get a Master of Divinity degree, that church very generously supported me through my studies, prayed for me, gave me opportunities to serve when I was home on my breaks. And then sure enough, when I graduated, they called me as an associate pastor. So I served in that capacity for a good long while. It's while I was an associate pastor that I also managed to get a THM from Westminster back when they offered it in conjunction with the London Theological Seminary.
I remember that.
So so I was able to go over to London once or twice a year.
The John Owen Center.
Yes, I loved that. So got my THM along the way.
That's not London, Ontario, for clarification.
That's correct.
Because our listeners' minds will go directly to Canada. That's right, London.
Yeah, this is across the pond.
Okay.
So served as an associate pastor for a good long while and then became the senior pastor of that same congregation. So all told, it was a 32-year relationship with that church I love, 25 of those years as one of the pastors. And about 2 months ago, at the end of May, I said goodbye to them and stepped down from my pastoral ministry there. It was as good a goodbye as you could have. They were so supportive and warm and encouraging and understanding toward me and my family. It was really lovely the way they took the news that I was stepping down, the way they prayed for me and encouraged me. So I stepped down there at the end of May, stroke of midnight, May 31st. I took about a week to catch my breath and then dove in here as the new Dean of Online Students on June 9th. And that's what I've been up to for these past couple months, and it's been amazing.
Well, there's so many crises in church leadership these days. I don't know if it's because we hear more about them or if generally there is an issue to be addressed. Either way, it needs to be addressed. But that's really encouraging in light of all that to hear that. It speaks, of course, to the Lord's faithfulness and His care of the congregation and of your ministry. But humanly speaking, we can't avoid saying it also speaks to your ministry, Paul, and to your character. So in light of that, I'm interested in the things that formed you as a pastor.
Sure.
Along the way. Tell us about your years at Westminster.
Yeah. So I got here in the fall of '96 when dinosaurs roamed the earth, way back when. And it was a wonderful 4 years to study here. I thank God for that season of study. And it really did make a difference, getting back to the church in Fairfax, to know that they were backing me and that they were supporting me, that they were praying for me, and that it was likely that they would want me to come serve them when I was done. That was huge, to have that sense of support, to have that prospect of service waiting for me when I graduated. That was wonderful.
Well, I can imagine, if I can interrupt, I can imagine that, thinking, having that support from your church, having sort of been sent with their prayers and encouragement, and knowing that they would very likely want to receive you back afterward, in a concrete sense, must have helped you understand the curriculum.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I'm saying that as a guy who was here with a sense of purpose, but not a sense of direction.
Interesting.
When I came as a student, I was driven by a curiosity about theology, and particularly apologetics and questions like that. But I didn't have I never had a sense of conviction about pastoral ministry, and I think that may have affected the way that I viewed the curriculum and the classroom experience and how I interacted with my classmates and things. So that's it's exciting to think about the fact that you came with so much support and encouragement, and how that must have helped your student experience sort of make sense to you and
It did.
and helped you endure the trials of the reading lists on the syllabi
That's
here.
right.
You know,
That's for sure.
the crucible that is Westminster reading lists and so on.
And I should name the church, New Hope Presbyterian Church, a PCA congregation in Fairfax, and I should name the pastor. Dave Coffin was the founding pastor of that church. And from the day I stumbled through the doors as a rather confused college graduate, Dave was a great blessing in my life, very generous with his time, helping me sort through all kinds of life and theology questions that I had on heart and mind. So Dave was a real gift to me and still is. And so when I got here to Westminster in the fall of '96, I still had a lot of questions. I was still sorting out a lot of confusion, like most new seminary students. But I was very blessed to have had those years already with that church, with that ministry. So for me, it was a wonderful convergence of my studies and training here at Westminster, as well as the ministry of that congregation back home and what that had meant to me. It was wonderful the way that all came together. And the valley that I went down into, and I'll tell this story because it really does matter for my ministry now. I was near the end of my third year in my MDiv studies, so this would have been spring of '99. And for months I'd had back pain that wouldn't quit. And so I finally went in for an MRI thinking I had a bad back. That was the working theory. Mr. Wolfe, you probably have a herniated disc, so let's do an MRI to prove it. And I went in for that MRI, and they said, no, you don't have a herniated disc, you have cancer. April 23rd, 1999. If you're ever diagnosed with cancer, you never forget the date. And that set in motion a process that took round about a full calendar year before a doctor finally said, you're done, go in peace.
Wow.
But the point is, I experienced that as a seminarian. And it is so remarkable to me now looking back on that. Obviously, I knew at the time that it was a formative experience just as a Christian man, diagnosed when we were only 11 months married, and in God's providence, I then became a pastor and then became a father. So that experience was formative for me in all of those ways. But what I'm appreciating now more fully is that it was also impactful for me in the way that I think about the seminary experience. I went through that as a seminarian.
Right.
And so what I have been saying over and over again to the students I've been caring for now, just for these first 2 months, is we get it. You're a seminarian right now, and that's great. That's a blessing. But that's not the main thing that's true of you. The main thing that's true of you is that you are a follower of Jesus wherever he has you on the map, and you're seeking to live out the full life that he has for you there. The blessings that he's appointed for you, as well as the trials. We get it. And we want to care for you in that spirit, that we want to come alongside you and get to know you and encourage you and pray for you as it were outside the classroom. I say to these students, look, I'm happy to talk about your studies. I'd love to. But that's not chiefly my role. I say, I'm not an academic dean. I'm not really involved in managing your coursework. I'm not an administrative dean. I don't really help run the seminary, and we can all be grateful for that. I say I'm a pastoral dean. I'm a dean for spiritual care. I'm here to come alongside you as a Christian, as a human being, because I get it. I remember. But what I also remember is that the things I was studying made a huge difference in what I was going through. So on the one hand, yeah, cancer was, in a sense, separate from my seminary experience. On the other hand, it was shaped and colored by what I was learning in the classroom. I mean, get this. The 4 classes I was taking when I was diagnosed, spring semester of '99, were Al Groves on the prophets, Sinclair Ferguson on the doctrine of the Holy Spirit, Richard Gaffin on the doctrine of Christ, and Gaffin on Acts and Paul.
Wow.
I mean, how's that for a quartet of classes? for a 28-year-old who's about to find out he has cancer. I mean, every class I went to, it was resurrection. The last thing I did the week I was diagnosed was a Wednesday night, and I remember I realized I was not feeling well. I got to get home. And the last thing I did up here before I drove back home to Virginia was I printed out and I turned in a paper for Al's class on the prophets, and it was a paper on Isaiah. Fear not, I am the Lord, I've redeemed you. When you pass through the waters, they will not overwhelm you. When you pass through the fires, you will not be burned. Turned in that paper on a Wednesday night, drove home that night, fell into bed. Less than 48 hours later, they tell me I have cancer. So that's why I say what I was learning definitely touched down in what I was going through. Yeah. And that, again, that's what I'm saying to students now, that we understand you've got 1,000 things going on in your life right now that are separate from seminary. But I also want to pray for you that the things that you're getting in your classes will make a difference in what you're going through.
So thank you so much for sharing, Paul. And the experience was so profound for you that you wrote a book about it in Spanish, evidently.
Mi Dios es fiel.
Mi Dios es fiel. And fortunately, it's been translated into English. Is
that how it went?
So, My God is True, Lessons Learned Along Cancer's Dark Road, with a foreword by an unknown, a young up-and-comer, Sinclair Ferguson.
He's got a future.
Yeah, he does have a future. We have high hopes for Sinclair. But I hope we can dig into this text in future conversations.
Sure.
But it's so helpful the way that you put that, Paul. Not the substance of the curriculum and so on not being an academic pursuit, but what you had an opportunity to sort of plug it in,
right.
even sort of mid-stride there in time during your studies. I too, saw some difficult things during my studies, and our students. Unfortunately, you can't detach from life for 4 years or whatever, to complete your studies.
Life goes on.
Life goes on, sometimes ruthlessly, mercilessly, but our Lord is merciful, and in that sense, I hope that we can count it all joy.
Right.
Even despite the heavy reading lists.
That's right.
So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So now that you're here, you're Dean of Online Students. What do you think about spiritual care online? I mean, you're transitioning from a church you knew very well from physical,
yes,
right?
right.
You were there for more than 3 decades, and now most of your students. I think it's just remarkable. Every interaction I have with I help run the online courses and so on, and our students come from all walks of life, right. And so on. I don't want to steal your thunder, so tell us about what you've seen and how where you see the ministry going and the ways in which you hope to support our students.
Sure. The first thing I'll say is I think it speaks volumes about Westminster, and I'm so grateful for Jerry and the foundation that he laid. I mean, he basically created this role. I think it speaks volumes about Westminster, and you touched on this earlier, that Westminster is committed to having a full-time dean of students, a dean for pastoral care for their online student body. That's remarkable. And I think that says a lot about how Westminster values the spiritual care component of the learning experience. And that's not just something I've been thinking. I've been hearing it from student after student. They're amazed when I tell them, this is what I do. My role is to come alongside you, to get to know you, to encourage you, to pray for you, perhaps to challenge you in your studies. They love it. Some of them hardly believe it, and I have to persuade them. I almost feel like I need to get out my business card and show them on the Zoom screen. Right. So that's been lovely to step into this role. I keep thinking of that passage in the Old Testament. I feel like Israel moving into a land with cisterns they didn't dig and cities they didn't build. I'm moving into this role, and Jerry and the student advisory team that has worked with him have put such a wonderful program of spiritual care in place. And beginning June 9th, I just got to step into it, and I have been standing on that foundation and enjoying the fruits of their labors. And I'll say this as well, going back to my time in ministry, pastoring our congregation in Fairfax. I remember when the pandemic rolled around, and suddenly, I don't think I'd ever heard of Zoom. And then we all had to learn Zoom, right?
Right.
And I remember our Sunday evening prayer meeting. I can't remember how long it had been going on in person, but suddenly now that prayer meeting, we were going to have to find a way to do it over Zoom. And I remember thinking, really? We're going to have a prayer meeting on our screens.
Yeah.
I remember at first, I couldn't even bring myself to lead group prayer that way. I just said, okay, we'll share prayer requests, and then everybody goes your separate ways. And because I thought, surely that's going to be too awkward. Nate, it wasn't long before that became one of the highlights of my week. And it lasted. I mean, pandemic rolled around 5 years ago? For 5 years, Sunday after Sunday, wherever folks were, we were able to get on our screens together on Zoom and have a kind of face-to-face. I know it's not the same. We can allow for that. But to have a kind of face-to-face interaction, Sunday after Sunday, dear friends in the Lord, catching up, sharing with one another the things of our lives, and then, yes, closing our eyes and praying for one another. And it was so remarkable to me, the power of those weekly meetings on Zoom. It wasn't long before I thought, we're not just going to do this over Zoom, but we should be grateful for it and for what it's made possible. And so I step into this role in which almost everything I do is on a screen now. It's over Zoom. But I've stepped into it not grudgingly, not rolling my eyes, but grateful for it.
Yeah.
I have had some of the most remarkable conversations already with folks all over the world.
Right.
Whom otherwise I never would have met. But now I'm connecting with them, and I'm doing so in this pastoral way. I say, look, I'm not your pastor. I'm mindful of my own limitations, and this online community is not your church. So I want to encourage you, your flesh and blood, brick and mortar fellowship of your local church, that's the main thing for you. But still, what we've got here, I think, in terms of a spiritual care program is beautiful. And I've seen it. I've seen it already.
Yeah. Yeah, from a kind of curricular point of view, I tip my hand a little bit. I think rightly done, online education can potentially outpace in person because there's so many benefits of flexibility and customization, and I think the idea that the content can't be as effectively delivered is just a myth. It's just a boogeyman, and I think so. I'm very optimistic about the potential. Again, I've seen sort of firsthand our course design, the work of our course design and curriculum delivery teams and all of that. And so I'm really encouraged, and we are all aware of the spiritual dangers that lurk two-dimensionally. The things that we have access to and that you could say have access to us and our loved ones on the internet. At the same time, why would it not be the same for spiritual edification? And just the opportunity to, before this recording, I came off of a prayer meeting, and the members of that team are all over the world, and it happens to be irrelevant at that moment, which is just tremendous. So I think there's a ton of potential. There's a lot to look forward to. And again, we're really excited you're here. Let me just mention a couple things that we can look forward to, Lord willing, in further conversations.
Absolutely.
So our students are benefiting from you. I want also all 5 of the Westminster podcast audience members. No, it's more than that. I'm kidding. And in fact, we have a speaking of technology, we have a global reach and an enthusiastic audience. You have a number of books, and I definitely want to get to your My God is True: Lessons Learned Along Cancer's Dark Road. I think we are not yet in a place in medical technology or medical science where this book is irrelevant. So I would love to get into this text with you, Paul, at some point.
Sure.
You also have Setting Our Sights on Heaven, Why It's Hard and Why It's Worth It, Suffering, Trials, Tribulation, Sanctification, and so on. And this little booklet from Banner of Truth, Suffering, God's Purpose in Our Pain.
Right.
Something tells me you have a pastoral heart, Paul, and this is just I really look forward to this stuff, and I know it's going to be edifying for the listener. So thanks for being here today.
Absolutely.
Don't you dare think it's the last time. So more to come, Paul, and welcome again to Westminster.
Thank you, Nate. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I'm looking forward to more.
This is the Westminster Podcast.
This has been a podcast of Westminster Media. Westminster Media is a ministry of Westminster Theological Seminary. If you would like to join us in our mission to train specialists in the Bible to proclaim the whole counsel of God for Christ and His global church, please visit www.wts.edu/donate. This podcast was hosted by Nate Shannon and edited by Brandon McLean Smith.